Ukraine claims to have struck Russia's largest explosives factory. Is this really going to put a dent in the Russian war machine? And just how is Ukraine able to do it? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about it. Okay, so this is a pretty wild story. Ukraine says it struck one of the largest explosives factory in all of Russia. This happened, of course, late last night. Ukraine's intelligence service said it hit Russia's, quote, largest explosives plant. And the specific plant was the state-owned Sverdlov plant in, God help me, in Nizhny Novgorod region. Now, what makes this interesting is that if you look on old Google Maps, it tells you just a little interesting smidge of detail, and that is that this bad boy is 900 kilometers from Ukraine, guys. It is further than Moscow. So the fact that Ukrainian drones are able to pretty easily penetrate Russian airspace is itself pretty impressive. Now, there's some problems. Now, and we're going to talk about those in a second, but I wanted to also mention that Ukraine has managed to strike a Russian airfield containing some of their most elite aircraft, MiG-31s and Russian Su-34s and 35s. So, the Ukrainians are sending a pretty clear message that they can reach out and touch the Russians wherever they are. But before I talk about kind of the larger implications of this strike, I wanted to mention that we've partnered again with Ukraine Aid Ops to raise money for Ukrainian units who are holding the line in Pokrovsk, particularly the 25th Airborne Brigade and the 14th Brigade. They are asking for drones, Mavics, drone jammers, range extenders, and power stations. And you guys know that the units that have put in requests to you guys through Ukraine Aid Ops have really, you guys have always stepped up for them, right? You helped out the 22nd when they took Kursk, raising over $300,000 for them, which is wild. But now these guys are asking for your help again. So what I am doing is setting a challenge. If you want to help me, if you guys can raise $100,000 for this unit, right, I will deliver the drones to them myself. I will personally do it. So if you want to have me link up with the boys from the 25th and the 14th, well, now's your time. Best of all, of course, you guys know I love collecting these patches, and they've offered up some of their patches for the 14th and the 25th Brigade for certain donation levels. I always appreciate it because, again, these patches, mean exactly what you have to give up for them, right? That's why, my combat patches, you can buy them on eBay for $14, but they're my combat patches, right? I earned them. They cost me a year in Afghanistan. So the fact is that you know that if you earn these patches, it's because you bought the unit one or even two drones. So plus there's a whole bunch of other cool rewards, including the drone jammer figure, which is honestly kind of sick. So plus, they're 501c3 here in the U.S., which means your donations are tax deductible. So the link is in the description. Help them out and potentially send me to Ukraine, right? Anyway, let's talk about the implications of this attack on this Russian explosives plant. Now, one of the things we've talked about is that the plant is reportedly, again, far from the border. Now, the Kremlin says that Russian air defenses intercepted and destroyed 110 drones, but we know that what isn't taken out is the stuff that's worrying. And generally, it seems like air defenses can knock out the modern stuff about 90% of drones. So we can infer that about 10 to 11 drones made it through and hit this explosives. There's one screenshot purporting to be the explosives factory, and this is where sort of the unknown it gets into it. Is that when you look at the map of the factory, right? We zoom in on it, and you can see that the factory is actually a pretty large complex, right? It looks like it's next to a fire station, classic. But you can see here that we're talking about a fairly large military-industrial complex. And when you have these multiple buildings together, it's very tough to take them out. It requires a big explosive, right? And the problem with these drones is that their warheads are relatively small. Against a small house, for example, I wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of a Ukrainian drone, right? But if they're roughly comparable to the like Shaheds, you're talking about under 500 pounds of explosives. And while that sounds like a lot, in terms of your ability to take out a large industrial factory, it's actually pretty limited. Now, there's some caveats to this, right? One is that sometimes you take out a critical part of a facility and it can be really hard, or a piece of equipment, it can be really hard to replace it, right? As we've talked about, precision machining, precision chemical, specialty chemical processing equipment, that stuff that would definitely be sanctioned and would be very difficult for Russia to obtain afterward, right? So if you don't need to take out the whole building in a flaming explosion, you might just need to take out that one thing they use to test the chemical purity of the material, for example. And if they can't get another one, then you might as well have destroyed the factory, right? And another example would be if you can cause the explosives to cook off. If you know where the explosives are stored and they're in a state where they can be cooked off, then you only need a relatively small detonation to cause the remaining explosives to, well, explode. And that, I think, might have been the most likely Ukrainian strategy. They might have targeted the specific building or buildings where they thought it was most likely that the explosives would be stored and in a state where they are most vulnerable. So again, will this have a larger impact on the rest of the war? The answer is not directly. I don't think that this one plant is going to be the game changer. While it's certainly going to be frustrating, and potentially very frustrating, depending on where exactly these 10-ish drones hit, I think the real story is one of steady attrition, right? Because Russia can still get explosive materials from countries like North Korea. They can get manufactured components from China and then simply combine them or finish the job, so to speak, in Russian territory. And of course, the largest explosives plant doesn't mean the only explosive plant. So, this is part of the Ukrainian campaign to reduce the Russians' ability to have munitions backing up their troops. And it seems to be working. Russian casualties continue to climb at what feels like an exponential rate. There's a lot of reports that Russian material is being seen less and less on the battlefield. Again, do sanctions... There's some evidence that sanctions are starting to really dig at the Russian economy. Anyway, guys, that's all I had. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. Thanks to Bill Collier, Robert Colburn, Gaius Marnie, Gina Cuesta, Chris Gorsuch, Fran Sicarius, L90, and Petra Tororu. I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.